I just wanted to show a little bit about my journey to where I am today, because it's definitely a part of the story that is kind of important. I started at Wired back in its first year, so long ago, and spent some time at CNET and the AP. I was at the New York Times and worked with an awesome guy there named Jeremy Zeiler to launch our first WordPress blogs back in the day, and to bring sort of all of the digital tools to the journalists. So I've really loved that about my career, is really just working with such amazing journalists throughout all of it. I moved back out here about 6 years ago to run product development at Wired. And with Nicole over here, we built a wicked, awesome custom WordPress for the Wired newsroom, which was a beautiful thing until Conde took it away recently and standardized everything. And then I went and joined John Battelle at a startup called Nuco, which we launched on Medium. And it was at Nuco and John's whole thesis about Nucos where I sort of decided to pivot, because John defines a Nuco as this new breed of companies. And I think they're not so new anymore. It's been about 10 years. But you really see companies who are defining a mission, attracting people who want to work there because they're passionate about what they do. It's not punching a clock. They really believe in what the value they're creating. And those are the kinds of companies that are really shaping the next generation of capitalism. They're playing a big role in pushing policy and in pushing a worldview and you know, pushing back on Washington, to be honest. So more and more, consumers are also really thinking a lot more than just about the bottom line. They want to shop and consume from companies who they trust and who they believe in and whose values they respect. So this is really driven by millennials for the most part. And again, I think over the last 10 years, we've seen that millennials will value, you know, the origin of something and the authenticity of something and what's behind something more than just a cheap price point. So for companies, it's increasingly important for them to take a stand and define their values and then determine how they want to act on those values with their communications. So you'll look at great examples, and I love talking about Patagonia. No connection to Patagonia, never worked there, just have always been a customer. But I am obsessed with the way that they are integrating their political views into their brand marketing. And they're, you know, currently suing the Trump administration and the head of the EPA for taking public land in Utah. But I'll show you more examples, but they are just so great at mixing up the product sale. You know, here's the baggy shorts and the people who live in them, and then the call to action. You know, go call your senator, go support your local farmers, take care of the environment. Another one is Shinola. They're one of these other Nucos, and one of the things that they really talk about a lot in their marketing is that they've created a lot of jobs in Detroit, and they're really proud of that, and they talk a lot about the authenticity of the products they're creating in these factories with local people. Even Starbucks is doing a good job of articulating what they believe in. You know, Howard Schultz, the CEO, about a year ago put out a letter where, you know, he voiced his support for DACA. He talked about being against the wall that Trump wants to build between Mexico and the US. He reinstated that he wants to hire refugees. So, you know, these are values-driven messages and increasingly really important. You look at Everlane, another company that really appeals to millennials, and it's not just because their clothes are streamlined and simple, but when you look at their nav bar, and all of us in here know a lot about nav bars and what they symbolize, but just so few links, but one of them is about factories, because that's really what they're leading with, is they want to bring transparency into their operations. So they want you to see exactly what factories they're working with in China and around the world, so you know where the clothes come from and you can feel good about them. So it's really on a brand at this point to become a great storyteller. That's the way they're going to communicate this purpose and bring their mission to life. So now I'm going to kind of shift into some nuts and bolts, really talking about how brands can organize for storytelling, and then we'll look at some fun examples of storytelling. So I think the first step is truly to define content, because it's become one of those terms like multimedia in the 90s. It became meaningless because it meant everything. And so, content, from what I've seen in a brand environment at Airbnb, could mean anything from an old school TV commercial to a social post to an email to a long form video or a long form article. So it really means everything. So I find it so confusing to be head of content, because I'm like, well, what are we making? Let's be specific. So I think when you talk about a global content strategy, put some real definition around what that means. And then second, truly sitting down to define your values. And often this is something that founders do really well, but sometimes it's not. So it's so important that the mission statement be clarified. And you guys saw this happening 10, 15 years ago. You'd walk into AOL, you'd walk into Google, and the mission would literally be written on the wall of the lobby. So you kind of get hit with it right when you come in. And people are still doing that because it's important. It's the foundation. So EY, building a better working world. Etsy, keep commerce human. So really being able to distill the essence of what it is the company is doing in a simple communication that everyone can rally behind, super important. And then you have to really think about, okay, well, if this is our mission, then who are we, and what are the values that we want to stand up for? What are these key themes we want to talk about in our communications, and how do we kind of bring our mission to life? And at Airbnb, I think you've seen this, and I'm not spilling any beans here, that acceptance, and this is a shot from the Super Bowl ad we created last year, acceptance is really at the core of the platform, because when you decide to be a host, you sign an agreement that says that you will not discriminate, that you will open your home and be blind to color and race and all the other things. It's also about a host-led world, and that's really about the economic empowerment that's possible through the platform. People who can keep their homes or afford retirement by becoming an Airbnb host. And then lastly, it's about the magic of travel and the human connection that happens offline when you stay somewhere and you meet a local host and they open their culture to you, and that's truly the magic of travel. And so you can contrast that to staying at a hotel where those things might not happen. Patagonia, again, and this is just me kind of observing what they're doing, but they state this on their website, and I love it. They want to talk about the best products, they want to cause no unnecessary harm, and they want to implement solutions to the environmental crisis. These are the values, these are the things that they are doing, and they will not put anything in front of that. It's very straightforward. You look at Tom's Shoes, another great example, and they've been doing this since they first started. You would buy a pair of shoes and Tom's would give one away. And now they've expanded that one-for-one principle to doing other things in the world, giving away clean water and some other social causes that they've backed. So another really important thing on this sort of journey to create a global content strategy is to decide who speaks for the brand. Because I think that the larger the company gets, the more you have thousands of spokespeople. And they're not all voicing the message in the same way. So truly, this is where it comes in handy to define and put some guidelines around the voice and tone, and to have these brand guidelines accessible to everyone. Because what I think we see is that different teams, from the product side to the PR side to the policy team to the marketing teams, they're all out commissioning different agencies to do different things, and they're giving them different guidelines. And so soon the brand is fragmented and showing up in a lot of different ways in the marketplace. So really trying to figure out, do you want to keep that group of voices small and tight and controlled so that you have more of a unified voice, or do you want to enable a way that it can kind of democratically filter out and still work? These are things to work through. So I think one other important thing is kind of when you think about having a global content strategy, you really have to take stock of what's already happening. And again, all these different teams may have a lot of different efforts. So there may be blogs spun up by different teams to achieve certain purposes. Certain teams are spinning up email newsletters, and then all of a sudden, the user is sort of neglected in all of this. So They're getting notifications, they're getting emails from you, they're seeing blog posts, they're seeing TV commercials, they're seeing social media, and it's in a lot of different voices, and none of it is moderated or sort of timed appropriately. So the audience is feeling bombarded. And so I think it's really important to kind of look holistically, who's doing what, and do we want to sort of try to rationalize any of this? And this is one of the things that we're hoping to do with WordPress at Airbnb, is we have a lot of different blogs out there, and so our first step was really just bringing them into VIP, and then we can do more on the front end to kind of unify some of the storytelling that's happening on those platforms. So getting the right tools, like for us, WordPress, is really important, and some of that is sort of figuring out, do you need, for example, with social media, are you on different platforms, or should you unify on one? We use a platform called Opal, where different groups can see what's planned, and so you can stagger the timing. Simple things like having a CRM system where people can see what emails are going out and who they're hitting. It sounds super basic, I think, to most people, but it's surprising when a company is growing so fast that so much can proliferate, and you have to kind of rein it in. So then I think that's sort of the procedural stuff, and that's the functional stuff that you need to think about when you're on the road to creating a content strategy. Then you can get down to the fun part, which is the storytelling. So I want to acknowledge that really the mainstay of most marketing budgets is performance, and the tried and true and the super effective Facebook ad is leading that stack. I'm not going to talk about that today because that's not my focus and that's not my expertise, but I want to acknowledge that that's where a lot of the budget goes. When we look at the storytelling menu, which I think is the fun part, you can look at everything from the big ticket items, the full-scale TV commercial, the long-form video content series, to the middle area where it might be sort of an editorial franchise or a content series, a sponsored post, to like the lower end, the staples, email, social media, using your own platform and your own site. And I think that every content strategy needs a mix of these things. So we'll talk through some of these examples. And I wanted to show you a few examples of things that I would say fall under the term content. And I never actually see TV commercials because we just watch things on demand in my house. How many people actually see TV commercials? Right, that's what I thought, almost no one. It's funny because when I was doing this talk with some of my colleagues and they said, well, we see them because we watch sports. So I was like, okay. Because and that is pretty much the only time I would ever see them too. Is like you'd go to a party to watch the Super Bowl and you watch the ads. So anyway, I wanted to just show one because I figured no one's really seen one in a really long time. So this is a Delta ad created by Wyden Kennedy, and you may recognize the voice. Oh, I can't reflect that here. Sorry, I am going to switch.
That's fine. Yeah. Let me just go to the screen.
Okay. That's why I was going to switch to the tab.
Do that, yeah.
Yeah. There you go. Sorry, folks. Have to completely redo. Okay, I got it. Okay, so here we go. Here's Delta. All this just to watch a TV ad. I'm forcing you to watch TV ads.
The old saying, good things come to those who wait, is just that, old. Those good things, you have to get out there and chase them. We see it in the millions of people we fly around the world, all of them living proof. Good things come to those who go.
So that was Viola Davis. And sorry, I need to go back to my deck now. So I think for those of us who have been in publishing our whole lives, and we know how scrappy you have to be, you know, the fact that an agency spends 6 to 9 months planning and executing that ad, and the budget is in the millions, right? And they go around the world with these like incredible cinema photographers. They hire talent from Hollywood, and then it gets edited down to a minute. That kills me, because it's like each one of those shots is this huge little mini story, right? I mean, it could be a YouTube series, it could be a mini documentary. There's so much rich stuff in there. And that's the kind of thinking that I'm trying to bring to Airbnb, and I think that other brands need to think about is, instead of that like long time horizon to produce that beautiful thing, like what if you just thought about that in a little bit more of a slice and diced way? Like, what stories can we extract and what channels can we put them in? So, another one I want to talk to about is, sorry guys, I knew this was going to be the tricky part. Okay, I'm going to have to go back and forth to my tabs here.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's an editorial franchise that we created at Airbnb that we call Not Yet Trending. And we did this as an experiment where to show kind of the, I'm going to have to switch back and forth. Is that going to be a big hassle?
Might be, yeah. Otherwise, you can play it from here, but it might load up.
You can just play from here. So what we did is we said, what data-driven insights can we find that will enable some great storytelling? So we looked at places that were just starting to trend. And we asked ourselves why. Why is there an increase in people going to these places? And so one was the Azores. Another was Durban, South Africa. Another was Porvoo, Finland. And so we took these amazing little multimedia storytelling pods and we deployed them. And they went and captured stories. We hired writers from reputable publications. And we shot great video and took beautiful photos and put together these just sort of multimedia pieces that were kind of just, here's the magic. Here's why you might want to go to the Azores. Here's what's happening with the subculture and the underground scene, and how could we kind of bring that to life. So this is just sort of scrolling through. And again, I feel like we just scratched the surface, because with the videos that we ended up putting together, they were these beautiful kind of glossy overviews, but each one really highlighted a really unique subculture where I thought, wow, like I wish I had a full video about this the rap scene in the Azores, because who would know that there's this thriving rap scene in the Azores? Or, you know, I wish I had a full story of the amazing subculture in Durban, South Africa. So let me show you just some footage from that. Can I switch back to? Yep. I'm going to switch to here. Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah. So this was amazing. It really blew my mind, because our team came back from Durban, and they had all this incredible footage. So I'll just play this one quickly.
Yeah, the mouse is really weird. Hold on.
To be able to know that we can kind of create something and there's not very much a set aesthetic and there's not a set way of doing things, that allows for a lot of freedom.
I think that in the next 5 years, the next big thing in the world, I invite people to resist the temptation to do the safe route. But this does require you to let go of stereotypes and have a fresh set of eyes. You should be open to being challenged a bit. You'll find the treasures and the jewels if you do that.
Okay, switch back to the deck. So when they came back, they had like 15 minutes of this street dancing scene, and I was just freaking out, because I was like, this is such great content, I love it. What can we do with this? And you know, it got edited down, and that's fine, because it worked well with the package, but just to think, like, that could have been a whole sort of mini film that we created on its own. And Airbnb is lucky, because they have so many talented creatives in our art department, which is sort of our internal agency on the marketing side. But the potential is there. So that series, we did about 10 of those over the course of the last year, and it was really the first experiment we did in sort of long-form storytelling. And they ran across all of our channels, but primarily in social. So they got kind of sliced and diced, put in our social channels, and then they were hosted on our WordPress blog. So this is one. How many of you guys have seen Poopery on YouTube? Okay. Should I show it or not? Okay, okay. So this is ridiculous because, I mean, whoever heard of like an herbal toilet spray that you spray in your potty before you go poop? I mean, it's not like a need-to-have product. But they have created this YouTube series. There's like 10 different videos. This thing has had 11 million views. And I won't play the whole thing, but just to give you a taste. Oh, shoot, sorry. Sorry, can you close this window?
Yeah, sure.
Let's close that and that. Okay, we can go to the, here, let's go back. There we go, that one, yeah. Okay, so this is 11 million views on YouTube. How to poop at a party.
You're finally meeting his family of 8 over a home-cooked meal big enough for 30, when you need to bake a keister casserole. Where is the restroom? It's right behind you. Right behind me. Oh, that is convenient. Now, what do you do? He's really hot. Most of the time I get real big trolls. I need you to help me out.
Okay, we could switch back. Okay, so I'm not going to show the whole thing. It might not be appropriate. But anyway, like my kids watch this for entertainment. They think it's hilarious because they think poop is hilarious. But anyway, this is just mind-blowing to me that it's a brand that no one ever heard of. They have this runaway YouTube hit, and now everyone's watching their content, right? And I don't know what they spent. That's a good question. It would be interesting to know. And that's sort of a great example of sort of the power of YouTube and creating something that goes viral. I mean, obviously, these guys got really lucky. I'm trying to move forward here. So here's another example of a brand doing great content the right way. Patagonia, my favorite, again. I don't know if any of you guys have seen this in your Netflix, what's suggested to you, but they did a documentary on people whose lives are transformed by the sea, so people who interact with the ocean. And they basically just profiled 4 different people. One is this woman who's this deep sea spearfisher who catches fish and makes sushi. Another is a surfer guy in Tahiti. And it's just a really compelling, really great documentary about these people. And you hardly notice, but they may or may not be wearing Patagonia swimsuits. It was not at all made evident. So that's how subtle it is. But yet, this is just a documentary people are going to watch and share and recommend to friends. Then we have what I would call a big editorial franchise at Airbnb. We have a partnership with Hearst to produce a print magazine. And this truly, our founder is a designer by training, and he's super passionate about print and loves the idea of there being Airbnb mags in host homes so that when you come and you stay in your listing, there's the power of the brand right there, and you can dive into a relaxing, kick back on the couch, because that's sort of what he thinks when he's a CEO on vacation on the weekend. He wants to get off his phone, and he wants to look at beautiful print magazines. So I would say it's definitely a work in progress. We've done 3 issues, and they're all, each one is kind of better than the last. But it's been amazing that we have this huge bucket of content now, and we can do a lot to distribute it in social. We've had some good luck geo-targeting emails. So for people who have just booked a trip to Barcelona, 30 days later, leading up to the trip, we'll send them our roundup, a great roundup about Barcelona. And then you'll see kind of the power of the franchise. We did just a fun kind of visual feature on bucket list trips, so different types of festivals around the world you might want to go to. And the editor Laura Brownstein ended up on Cheddar talking about that. So not only was it the magazine, but then it became, you know, a video interview. And so the power of that content and the potential to get it into so many different places is pretty awesome. And then there's sort of a more classic sponsored post. This one is maybe not super classic. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go back to the browser. This is one that I did when I was working on Nuco Shift for the Deloitte Center for the Edge. And Deloitte works with, it's that, the black and white tab, the last one, local motors, yeah. So Deloitte works with a lot of interesting clients. This was a auto manufacturer that was sort of crowdsourcing designs in Arizona and building these really interesting vehicles. And so I worked with a contact at Deloitte. Sorry, it's not rendering very well. They had put out kind of a fairly straightforward implementation of this in their channels. And just, you know, no one really saw it, and it was sort of ho-hum. And so, but they had done all this amazing reporting. They had tons of photos, they had tons of video, they had audio. I don't know why it's not coming in. I loaded everything before. So I just said, give me all your assets, and I will build you something on Medium, and you can see, you know, what you think. And so we plugged everything into Medium, and we were able to really make it a full multimedia presentation for them and kind of redistribute it. So it went out to all of our channels, and they were able to get people engaged again in sort of a new way. And so that, again, it was just sort of bringing some of the basics that you know from a publishing environment to a brand to say, like, let's just try this with a different hat on, and it worked so well for them. Sorry, you guys. I will send around links later so people can look at examples. And again, here's Patagonia, my favorite. I love that the email subject will say baggy shorts, and then the alt text that they put, the default text that you see in the email line, is always the call to action. So it's like baggy shorts and support your local farmers market. So well, I'm not going to show you, but you scroll down and it's literally like shorts, call to action. And that's the format of every email they get. But I open all of them not because I love every product, but because I'm just curious what that call to action is going to be. Like, what do I need to know about that I don't know when it comes to what's going on with the environment? They're like my feeder now. Social media is probably its own talk, and I'm happy to talk to people offline about this. But I'll just show a few examples of, I think, using the medium well to tell stories. HBO on International Women's Day, they didn't have sort of the trite, like, to all the women, happy International Women's Day. So they just started putting out tweets in the voices of certain leading characters from their shows. And there were about 10 of them throughout the day, but they just kind of staggered it. And so it became a little bit of a game where people were like, oh, what character is that? Is it like Cersei from, you know, Westworld, or is it, you know, who are these people? And it was just one of those things where it's fun, it uses the medium in an appropriate way, and it's not kind of the trite, usual corporate thing. Instagram, again, I think some brands do this really well, some do it really, really poorly. One reason why I think Airbnb is doing it well is we curate all of our Instagrams from our community, so it's all UGC. But then we are so hardcore about the standards we apply for visuals. So they literally everything that we reshare conforms to our kind of visual specs that have been put forth by Bridget, our photo editor, and she comes from a publishing background. She came from Time and Newsweek. And that's what makes it really consistent. Like literally the light, the frame up, the spatial allocations, it's so consistent. And so it really comes out as a strong unified voice for us. And I think it's one of our best mediums because our product is so visual. So to sum it all up, what I've shown you is a bunch of different ways to tackle storytelling from big to small. This is kind of a chart I put together kind of a long time ago, but this is just sort of showing the potential for distribution when you think of, at the core element is a story. In this case, it was a feature from the magazine called Portraits of Shanghai, where we profiled a bunch of different hosts in Shanghai. And you know, it lived in the print magazine. It lived on our website. It went into paid media channels. It went into a playlist that we created in the product itself. And it became an Instagram story. And again, it became one of those targeted emails, showed up in the playlist that we pushed to you. And then after the trip, we can say, you know, how was your trip to Shanghai? Did you go to any of those experiences? Did it meet your expectations? What did you see? And then we can collect that UGC and we can feed that back. We can feed that back into Instagram, into Facebook, et cetera. So this is what I mean by content ecosystem thinking. It's just thinking of all the channels and all of the appropriate ways to package up a story for those channels. And this is where I think there's so much opportunity, because I think it's so many companies. Each of these has a different owner and is literally like sitting in a different building. And so no one's talking to each other. And so it seems so simple if there was only one person that was looking after it, but that's never the case. So there's a lot of influence on lobby. So, but really, when you guys know, and you come from a publishing background, this is just basic, right? Like this is like how a publisher thinks about getting stories out. I mean, this is the thinking that we, as product managers at the New York Times, at Wired, at a lot of places, this is what we spent the last 15 years training journalists to do, right? We said, like, when you go report the story, don't forget, you know, we need shots for Instagram, we need a tweet written, we need the Facebook post pre-written before you publish. You know, we spent so long setting up the right way to do things. And brands just need to catch up to that approach. So once you've sort of figured out your storytelling mix, you have to think about the right cadence, because it's just important to cultivate an audience, engage an audience, but not piss them off, as we all know. So what I say is I think there's sort of an always-on approach, and that starts with sort of the smallish size things. So that's probably social media. You're probably talking on social media every day. You have something to say there, or a reason to engage. That might be an always-on PR effort. And then you have kind of more medium-sized efforts, like maybe that is creating an editorial franchise and figuring out, like, I'm going to put one out, you know, once a month, and I'm going to back it up with a paid boost. And so what does that sort of once a month look like? And does that dovetail with any other things that the brand is doing in the world? Does it dovetail with partnerships? Does it dovetail with events or activations? Does it dovetail with huge events in the world? So that could be, you know, the World Cup, the royal wedding. What are big cultural moments that you might be able to seize upon? And also not just randomly, but cultural events that really speak to your values and address your audience. So, you know, one kind of lens that we try to apply is where can we add something unique to the conversation, not just where can we glom on? You know, it's not just talking for the sake of talking, but like this really resonates with the 3 values that we've laid out. It really reinforces a key message about what we believe in, and so therefore it's a good time for us to show up. And an example of that is when Trump made his comments about shithole countries. I don't know if you guys remember this. A few months ago, he talked about El Salvador and Haiti and Africa as being shitholes. And we had set up our social team to kind of be resourced and to be on the pulse of the news. And so they were ready to react, and we grabbed a team and we put them together in a war room, and we said, this is bullshit. Like, what are we going to do to address it? And so we said, we'll put together a quick spot about the most beautiful listings we have in these places. And we'll say, you know, hey, we know that there's been some expletive-filled interest in these countries, and we want to show you, you know, the beauty of these places, and here they are. And it was perfect timing. It was a perfect moment for us to take a stand and say something, and we got some really nice reaction to that. And so then, again, I think you think about the large size efforts, and that is like the Super Bowl commercial. That is, you know, your huge F8. That's your huge moment where you spend all your money, you put months and months of effort into it. But the important thing is that there's this mix of sort of effort and budget, and then the cadence and the planning that goes into that. So at this point, then you just really have to think about your channels and your partners. You know, talking to the right people that can help provide content. You don't have to create it all yourself. So there's so many great publishers to partner with, or agencies or external freelancers. You know, for us, our community has huge potential to tap into. When you think of all the people that are using Airbnb's platform, there's so many professional photographers and videographers and writers. So how could we source great content from our community, because that's really the authentic stuff for us. And it's really important to decide on your key performance indicators. So, you know, we all know that content has a different approach and goal than conversion. So when you look at your goals for a piece of long-form content, you know, in publishing you think, you know, I really want this to be about time spent. I want to hook that person to read my story. I want them to spend 1 to 2 to 3 minutes reading that story, and then I can declare victory. Because I know that person will come back and do it again and do it again. And maybe at some point they'll subscribe, or at some point they will share my story with a friend, right? And those are sort of the metrics that we as publishers always think about. So at a brand, it's really important to separate efforts, because that paid Facebook ad is all about conversion. That's its #1 job. So the message is just completely different. The long-form series with the dance scene, underground dance scene in South Africa, that's just, I want you thinking about the brand when you read that, and I want you to think of us as that edgy underground person, you know, friend that's telling you where to go because it's the most interesting place in the world. And then maybe you come back 6 months later when you're ready to book a trip. So it's that top of funnel activity, and so really important that those metrics are more oriented around engagement and not conversion. And then here's my little beef about marketing land. After running an agile team at Wired and learning so much from my team there about how to work in that way, I kind of can't get out of that way now. And so here I am in marketing land, and the planning is just so slow, and it's such long-term thinking, and it's slow to experiment, it's slow to prototype. And I think that marketers could benefit so much from really knowing how Agile works, from literally a daily stand-up with a 10-minute touch base versus like a 2-hour meeting. And just the concept of experimenting and prototyping and testing and learning and iterating. Like, let's do a few things this month that are different. Let's try a couple new things that we might not have done that puts us out of our comfort zone, and then just come back and figure out quickly, like, do we double down with this effort, or do we just abort and do something else? And so I think given this mix of assets and channels at our fingertips here, there's so much experimentation that could be done. So obviously you need those teams that are doing the long-term planning too. But I think some of that Agile mindset would be really beneficial in the brand environment. So for people who have publishing experience and are thinking of working more with brands to tell stories, that's such a nice asset to bring. So here's the steps, 10 steps to building your content ecosystem. You can take these away. I have these listed out in the takeaways one-sheeter that you guys will get. You can call me. And I have my email here for you guys too. I love talking about this stuff, so I'm happy to come and talk to people, to consult. So happy to chat anytime. Please reach out. And I'm open for questions if people want to do that.